Hello and welcome back to Solomon's Cave. And welcome to the 6th video on Genesis 1 verse 1. Where we now have reached the final word in the first verse of the Bible, ha-erets. Keep in mind that I will only look at the meaning of the word ha-erets in isolation, while in the next video I will explore what it means when it is used in the combination shamayim and arets, or heaven and earth, as I mentioned in the previous video. Alright, first the grammar. 2 videos ago I explained that the word eth introduces a definite direct object, or the thing that God, or Elohim, is creating or baraing. The first of 2 definite direct objects was ha-shamayim, the heaven. And now we have come to the second thing that God is creating, ha-erets. And if you have been paying close attention, you might already recognize this part of the word as the prefix ha, which is the definite article. Now, it looks very similar, but not exactly identical to the ha prefix for ha-shamayim. The reason is that the word arets starts with the letter aleph, which is responsible for these minor orthographic changes, but you don't need to worry about it right now. But I'll link a video for you to look at in case you're interested. Oh, and these little thingies? Those are accents. You don't need to worry about those either, but they are there to indicate that we have reached the end of the verse. Otherwise, the word arets is remarkably unremarkable from a grammatical point of view. It is a pretty regular feminine noun that occurs more than 2,500 times in the Old Testament. Oh, and here it is in the singular. Its meaning in most vocabulary lists or flashcards is usually given as earth, land. Reading the full entry in the dictionary additionally gives us meanings like ground or piece of ground, and territory or soil. Given the context, and the fact that the word arets is not connected with a name, we can exclude the translation of land in the sense of country. For in those cases it is usually connected with the name of that country, like Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, or Eretz Mitzrayim, the land of Egypt. Also, given that it is right next to the word heaven, we should think big, like the English word earth. In the Old Testament, the word arets, when referring to earth, can have a couple of different nuances as well. For example, the word ha-shamayim, as we saw in the last video, sometimes refers to the place where God lives, and arets sometimes refers to the place where humans live, so the physical realm. See for example Psalm 115 verse 16. The shamayim are the Lord's shamayim, but the arets he has given to the children of men. At other times, arets is contrasted with shamayim as being low versus high, like in Psalm 103 verse 11. For as high as the shamayim are above the arets, so great is his steadfast love toward those who fear him. Both of these verses contrast shamayim with arets, but interestingly enough, it appears that in one case there is a contrast between the spiritual and the material realm, and in the other case, the earth upon which we are standing versus the heavens, which are also physical but above us, so the atmosphere and space. Now it is true that these are both poetic lines, and if you squint, you may be able to see a different nuance here. But these examples are illustrative in showing how both of these ideas and contrasts can easily be read into arets. Another possible nuance is when the word arets can refer to the inhabitants of the world. A common example is Genesis 41 verse 57. By this time Joseph is governing Egypt while there is a famine, and the whole arets comes to him to beg for grain, since he has stored up a bunch. In this case, it is not the arets itself that comes, but the people living in or on the arets. With a fancy term, this is called a metonymy, where you refer to one thing, in this case people, by mentioning something closely associated with that thing, in this case the arets they live on. Like when Americans say things like, the White House has done something. What they mean is that the president has done something. Or, even more precisely, the people working in the White House have done something at the instruction of the president. But here, arets is not a metonymy for people, as at this point there are no people yet. And finally, there is the possible meaning of dry land, as opposed to the seas and the oceans. This is what we see later in Genesis 1, when, on the third day, all the waters are gathered in one place, and then the newly uncovered dry land is called arets. However, this is also likely not what is intended, given that I think there is something interesting going on in days 2 and 3 of the creation week, since the words shamayim and arets are in a way redefined for the remainder of the chapter, but I don't think this redefinition applies retroactively to verses 1 and 2. Though the precise way in which verse 1 relates to verse 2 and the rest of the chapter is admittedly a little tricky, and I'll discuss that in more detail when we reach the beginning of verse 2. Now, more recently, in the last couple of decades especially, there has been a bit of a debate about the ancient Hebrew or ancient Near Eastern conception of the world. Famously, for the ancient Greeks, the debate about the shape of the world was definitively settled when in the 3rd century BC, the scholar Eratosthenes compared the angles of the shadow that the sun cast during the summer solstice in Upper and Lower Egypt. With that, he was able to prove that the earth was a sphere. But what did the ancient Hebrews believe? Well, that is perhaps an interesting topic for another video, or a series of videos. For now, however, let me just say that whatever the ancient Hebrews believed, there is no clue in the word arets itself. Arets could refer to the earth, whether it has the shape of a flat disk, a sphere, a concave bowl, or a pyramid. Let's wrap up this video by doing something interesting. Let's count. As you all likely know, the first chapter of Genesis tells the story of a 7-day creation week. 6 days of God creating things and 1 day of God resting. And the first verse contains exactly 7 words. But if you go a little deeper, you will find 7s all over this chapter. Now, I don't want to give a comprehensive list here just yet, but let me add a few of the 7s that you can count in Genesis 1. Oh, and for the record, I believe that the chapter division, which was added much later, was put in the wrong place. Chapter 1 actually ends after Genesis 2 verse 3. In this first chapter then, the word arets occurs 21 times, or 3 times 7. Oh, and it appears that I've missed one. The word Elohim, God, occurs 35 times, or 5 times 7. And just look a little bit ahead in this series, because Genesis 1 verse 1 has 7 words, but Genesis 1 verse 2 has 14 words. 2 times 7. Like seriously, there are 7s all over the place, and this is just the beginning. Thanks for watching. If you want to support me on Patreon or become a member on YouTube, follow the links in the description so you can see my videos early, vote on topics, ask questions, and more. But to get back to the question of which meaning of arets we should think of exactly, and also which meaning of shamayim or heaven we should think of in this verse, tune in for the next video where I will discuss the meaning of those 2 words together.